I still remember the exact moment my son looked me in the eye and laughed. Not the warm, loving laugh I'd heard when he was a child, learning to ride his bicycle. Not the embarrassed chuckle when I'd catch him sneaking cookies before dinner. This was different. This laugh was cold, dismissive, cruel. "Mom, you're broke and useless," he said, standing in my kitchen doorway in his $1,500 suit. "Leave the real work to those who actually earn their money." His wife stood behind him, nodding with that practiced smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. I watched them drive away in his new Mercedes, and as the engines faded down the street, I whispered to the empty room, "If only you knew where that money truly came from." That day changed everything. But to understand why, I need to take you back 7 years, to the moment my world first fell apart and then quietly rebuilt itself into something my son never suspected. My husband, Thomas, died on a Tuesday morning in March. He'd been sick for months, but somehow we'd convinced ourselves he'd pull through like he always did. Thomas was a fighter, a brilliant businessman who'd built our family company from nothing more than a dream and a borrowed truck. On his deathbed, he gripped my hand with what little strength remained and said, "Knowledge is power, Margaret. Never let greed break this family." I promised him I wouldn't, though I didn't fully understand what he meant then. I would learn soon enough. After the funeral, after the well-wishers had stopped bringing casseroles and the sympathy cards stopped arriving, I found myself sitting in our lawyer's office, listening to Mr. Harris read through Thomas's will. My son Daniel sat beside me, already checking his phone, barely paying attention. He assumed everything would be split evenly, simple and clean. What Mr. Harris revealed was anything but simple. Thomas had left Daniel a modest inheritance and a management position in the company. Yes, but the controlling shares, the real power, the accounts that held the company's future, those he'd placed solely in my name. "Your husband was very specific about this arrangement, Mrs. Chen," Mr. Harris explained, sliding the documents across his mahogany desk. "He wanted to ensure the business remained protected." Daniel barely glanced at the papers. "That's fine. Mom can handle the boring paperwork," he'd said with a casual wave. "I'll focus on growing the business." He had no idea what he'd just dismissed. In that moment, I made a decision that would define the next 7 years of our lives. I would let him believe he was in control. I would let him think his success was entirely his own. I thought I was protecting him, nurturing his confidence. I didn't realize I was feeding something far more dangerous. I stepped into Thomas's role quietly, learning the business from the ground up. Our accountant, a patient woman named Susan who'd worked with Thomas for 20 years, taught me how to read the financial statements, how to track the investments, how to see the patterns my husband had always seen. What I discovered troubled me deeply. Daniel's business instincts were reckless at best, catastrophic at worst. He wanted to expand too quickly, borrow too heavily, spend on flash rather than foundation. Within 3 months of taking over his management role, he'd already made 2 deals that would have bankrupted us if I hadn't quietly intervened. The first time I saved him, he never knew. He'd committed to a supplier contract that would have locked us into prices triple the market rate. I called the supplier directly, explained there had been a misunderstanding, and negotiated us out of it while Daniel was in the Bahamas on what he called a business development trip. The second time was where he almost signed away our proprietary manufacturing process to a competitor in exchange for a quick cash injection. I had Mr. Harris send a legal letter, stopping the deal hours before the signing. Daniel complained about legal red tape, but moved on to his next big idea. I told myself I was teaching him, protecting him, until he learned. But with each rescue, I made his mistakes invisible. And invisible mistakes teach nothing. The money started flowing soon after. Daniel's company, technically a subsidiary of our family business, though he treated it as his own, empire began to thrive, not because of his genius, though that's what he believed. Every time he faced a cash flow problem, a mysterious investor would appear. Every time a deal fell through, a better opportunity would emerge. Every time he overextended, a financial cushion would materialize just in time. He thought he was blessed with incredible luck and sharper instincts than his old-fashioned father ever had. He never questioned it. Pride has a way of making people blind to the hands that lift them up. I remember watching him on the local business channel 2 years ago, being interviewed about his success. "The key is taking bold risks," he told the camera with absolute confidence. "My father was too conservative. Sometimes you have to trust your gut and go all in." I sat in my living room, the same room where Thomas and I had raised him, where we'd celebrated his birthdays and graduation, and I felt my heart crack just a little. He was erasing his father's legacy with every word, rewriting history to make himself the hero of a story he didn't even understand. His wife Rachel made everything worse. She came from money, or at least she acted like she did, and she encouraged every excessive impulse Daniel had. "You're a visionary," she'd tell him at family dinners. "Don't let anyone hold you back with their small-town thinking." She never said my name, but her eyes would flick to me when she said it. The visits became less frequent. First, they'd skip Sunday dinners occasionally, then most weeks. Then they'd appear only on major holidays, staying for an hour or two before rushing off to some gallery opening or cocktail party with people who mattered more than I did. I forgave every absence, every forgotten birthday call, every holiday cut short. "He's building his life," I told myself. "He's busy. Successful people are busy." I'd look at Thomas's photo on the mantel and imagine what he'd say. Would he be proud of Daniel's success? Would he be disappointed in how I'd handled things? Would he tell me to pull back, to let Daniel fall and learn? I never knew for certain, so I kept going, kept protecting, kept funding the empire my son believed he'd built alone. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon last month. I hadn't seen Daniel in 3 months, despite living only 20 minutes away. He called that morning, casual as anything, saying he'd stop by. I was excited. I baked his favorite lemon cookies, the ones I used to make when he'd come home from school. I set out tea. I imagined we'd sit and talk like we used to, before the money and the success and the distance. He arrived in a new car, something Italian and low and expensive. Rachel stayed in the passenger seat, scrolling her phone. Daniel walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, and immediately launched into stories about his latest achievements. New investors from Singapore, expansion plans in 3 new markets, a vacation home he'd bought in Aspen. He talked for 20 minutes straight without asking me a single question about my life. Finally, during a pause, I mentioned something small. The property taxes on the house had increased, and I was having trouble covering them this quarter. Could he possibly help? I tried to keep my voice light, casual, not wanting to burden him. His reaction is seared into my memory like a brand. He laughed, actually laughed, head thrown back like I'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Mom, seriously, you need to sell this old place. It's too much for you anyway." He looked around our family home with barely concealed disdain. "Move into one of those retirement communities, where you can play bingo and make friends your own age. You're broke and useless. Now there's no shame in admitting it. Let the professionals handle real estate and investments." Rachel had come inside by then, standing behind him like a supporting actress who'd rehearsed this scene. "We'll help you find somewhere nice, Margaret," she said with false sweetness. "Once you sell this place, there should be enough to keep you comfortable. We'll make sure you're taken care of." The way she said taken care of made my blood run cold. I looked at my son, this man I'd carried in my body, nursed through every illness, celebrated through every triumph, and I barely recognized him. His eyes were empty of anything resembling love or respect. I was a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed, an embarrassment to his new life. My hands trembled as I poured tea I no longer wanted to drink, but the trembling wasn't fear or sadness. It was rage, pure, crystalline rage that had been building for 7 years, buried under layers of maternal love and misguided protection. I'd done this. I'd created this monster by shielding him from consequences, by letting him believe success came without struggle, by making myself invisible in the story of his life. "I see," I said quietly. They took my silence for acceptance, and left. 30 minutes later, Daniel already on his phone, making his next big deal. I stood at the window and watched them drive away, and something fundamental shifted inside me. My silence had built his arrogance. It was time to dismantle it, brick by brick. The next morning, I called Mr. Harris. "I need to see all the trust documents," I told him. "Everything related to Daniel's company and our family business, and I need to understand exactly what powers I have." We met that afternoon in his office, the same office where I'd first learned about Thomas's arrangements. Mr. Harris spread the papers across the table, and together we reviewed everything. The picture was even clearer than I'd remembered. I held controlling interest in the parent company. Every subsidiary, including Daniel's precious empire, was ultimately under my authority. The trust Thomas had established gave me power to approve or deny major expenditures, to freeze accounts, to reclaim shares. My signature was on every significant document, every major asset. I'd just never exercised that power. "There's something else you should know," Mr. Harris said, his expression grave. "Daniel has taken on substantial debt in the past 6 months. He's been leveraging future earnings, assuming the cash flow will continue. If that flow stops," he didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what bankruptcy looked like. "If I pull the funding, he loses everything." I asked. "Everything," Mr. Harris confirmed. "The company, the cars, probably the house. The debts will come due, and without the trust's backing, he has no way to cover them." I thought about Thomas, about his final words: "Knowledge is power. Never let greed break this family." He'd known. Somehow, he'd seen this possibility and built in safeguards. He'd given me the tools I needed. Now I had to decide if I had the strength to use them. "Do it," I said. "Freeze all transfers from the trust to Daniel's accounts. Reclaim the shares that are rightfully under the company's control, and schedule a board meeting. It's time." I took my seat at the table. Mr. Harris looked at me with something like admiration. "Your husband would be proud, Margaret." "My husband should have taught our son humility," I replied. "Since he's not here to do it, I will." The machine I set in motion moved slowly at first. Then, with devastating speed, the monthly transfers Daniel had relied on simply stopped. The emergency credit lines backed by the trust were quietly closed. The investor relationships that had seemed so solid, many of them personal friends of Thomas who'd been helping for my sake, began politely declining Daniel's calls. Within 3 weeks, his carefully constructed empire began showing cracks. I heard about it through Susan, our accountant, who Daniel had called in a panic. Payments were bouncing. Suppliers were demanding cash up front. The Singapore investors had backed out when their due diligence revealed the debt situation. I listened to her reports with a calm I didn't entirely feel. This was my son. I was systematically dismantling his life. But I remembered his laugh, his words, his contempt, and I didn't stop. The explosion came on a Monday morning. Daniel's car screeched into my driveway at 7 a.m., and he burst through my door without knocking. His face was red, his expensive suit rumpled like he'd slept in it. Rachel trailed behind him, looking frightened for the first time since I'd known her. "What did you do?" he shouted. No greeting, no pretense of civility. "My accounts are frozen. My credit lines are canceled. I have investors threatening to sue me." "What did you do?" I was making coffee, the same morning ritual I'd maintained for 40 years. I finished pouring my cup before I turned to face him. "I did nothing, Daniel. I simply stopped doing everything." "What the hell does that mean? Did you interfere with my business? Did you sabotage me?" "I'll sue you. I swear to God." "Sit down," I said, and something in my voice made him stop mid. I'd never spoken to him that way before. It was the voice of someone who'd run a business, made hard decisions, held power quietly for 7 years. It was Thomas's voice, living through me. I walked to my study and retrieved a folder I'd prepared. Inside were copies of trust documents, transfer records, account statements, 7 years of evidence. I laid it on the kitchen table between us. "Read," I commanded. I watched his face as he went through the papers, the confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror as he recognized my name over and over again. Every major account my signature, every crucial transfer my authorization, every miracle save my intervention. His face drained of color until he looked like he might be sick. "This can't be right," he whispered. "I built this. I made the deals. I grew the company. You made reckless decisions that would have destroyed everything your father built," I said, my voice steady. "Every time you stumbled, I caught you. Every time you fell, I lifted you up. Every dollar you spent, every car you bought, every suit you're wearing, it all came from the trust your father left under my control. It all came from your broke and useless mother." The words hung in the air between us. Rachel had gone completely pale, backing toward the door like she wanted to disappear. Daniel just stared at the papers, his hands shaking. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why did you let me think? I thought I was helping you grow," I said, and for the first time, my voice cracked. "I thought if I protected you, you'd become confident and strong. I didn't realize I was teaching you to be arrogant and cruel. That's my failure, not yours. But the lesson ends now. What are you going to do?" His voice was small, childlike. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, scared of the dark, calling for his mother. "Your company will declare bankruptcy," I said. "The debts are too large, and I won't cover them. You'll lose everything you think you own." but I won't leave you destitute. Your father wouldn't want that, and neither do I. Then what? Rachel spoke for the first time, her voice sharp with panic. What do you want from us? I looked at her, this woman, who'd encouraged every bad instinct in my son. I want nothing from you. But Daniel will work for what he gets from now on. No more handouts. No more invisible safety nets. If he wants to rebuild, he'll do it the way his father did from the ground up. The bankruptcy proceedings took 6 weeks. I watched from a distance as Daniel's world collapsed. The house went to the bank. The cars were repossessed. The fair-weather friends disappeared like smoke. Rachel left him on a Tuesday, the same day of the week Thomas had died. Daniel called me that night, crying for the first time since he was a teenager. I let him cry. Some lessons are learned through tears. When the dust settled, I made him an offer through Mr. Harris. A position in our family company, the real company, the one his father had built and I'd been protecting, not as a director or executive, as a floor employee in the manufacturing division, minimum wage to start, with the possibility of advancement if he proved himself. He could accept it or walk away. His choice, he accepted. The first day I visited him at work, 4 months after our confrontation, I barely recognized him. He wore work boots and company coveralls, safety goggles perched on his head. His hands were calloused, his face sunburned from working in the yard. He was sweeping the loading area, the same area where his father had once swept 30 years ago, when the company was just starting. He saw me and froze, his face a mixture of shame and something else. Maybe humility, maybe understanding. I walked over to him slowly. The fence at the house needs repairing, I said, keeping my voice neutral, and the gutters should be cleaned before winter. Do you have time this weekend? He nodded. I'll be there Saturday morning. That Saturday, he showed up at 8 a.m. with his tools. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, the way Thomas and I used to work in our garden. He didn't complain. He didn't check his phone. He just worked, methodically fixing what was broken. Over the following months, a new routine emerged. He'd come by on weekends, helping with repairs, sometimes staying for dinner. We didn't talk much about what had happened. Some wounds heal better without constantly picking at them. But I saw the changes. The way he thanked me for meals instead of expecting them. The way he asked about my day, instead of talking only about himself. The way he looked at the house, our family home, with appreciation instead of disdain. One evening, 6 months after his company collapsed, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. He'd just finished repainting the fence, the same fence he'd once mocked me for needing help with. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, for what I said, for how I treated you, for everything. I let the words settle between us. An apology is meaningless without change, and he'd already shown me the change through his actions. I'm sorry too, I replied, for protecting you so much. You never learned to stand on your own. Did Dad know? He asked. Did he know this might happen? I thought about Thomas, about his final words, about the careful way he'd structured everything. Your father was a very wise man. He knew that wealth without character is just money. He wanted you to have both. Daniel nodded slowly, staring out at the fence he'd repaired. I think I'm finally starting to understand what that means. We sat together as the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Inside the house, I'd left a photo of Thomas on the mantel, the same photo I looked at every day. Later that night, after Daniel had gone home to his modest apartment, I stood before that photo and whispered, "We taught him the hard way, didn't we?" In the reflection of the glass, I saw myself smile. Not the sad, worried smile of a mother watching her child destroy himself, not the pained smile of someone quietly suffering disrespect. This was something different. Contentment, peace, the satisfaction of a lesson finally learned.